Today is Saturday, May 31st, and I am covering Congresswoman Maxine Dexter's town hall in Gresham, Oregon. A lot happened at the town hall today, so I'm breaking it up into multiple videos. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll probably also slap up a compilation of all of the videos together because I get lots of feedback from people that they prefer to see everything all spliced together in one long compilation, and they don't have to go hunt for the separate videos. So I will be sure to do that for y'all. Now, Congresswoman Maxine Dexter is a physician. She's also a freshman member of Congress. She took over Earl Blumenauer's seat in January. And I'm sure she thought she would be enacting really positive pro-public health, pro-climate change fighting legislation when she got into Congress, because she thought she would be working with President Kamala Harris. And I can't really conceptualize what it's like for freshman Democratic members of Congress, especially those in the Progressive Caucus. I imagine it is really rough every single day as they are trying to hold the line for democracy. When they are having to sit in committees and sit across the aisle from Republicans who are the party of fascism, and then also have to butt heads with, push back against, be suppressed by establishment corporate Democrats in their own party. I do not envy any progressive member of Congress right now, but I so appreciate the fact that they are fighting hard for all of us and for democracy. Now, Maxine said a couple of interesting things in her opening remarks that I want to reference here. She said, "Did you know there aren't very many union members in Congress?" And I had not actually thought about that. I got somebody in my comments last night who said that she couldn't run for Congress because she had a GED and no college degree. And I was like, you don't need a high school diploma, and you definitely don't need a college degree to run for Congress. But then I looked it up, and, back in the 40s and 50s, about 50% of the members of the House had a college degree. It's 96% now. And everybody in the Senate, except for one person, has at least a bachelor's degree, and lots of them have advanced degrees, JDs, etc. And when the Congresswoman said there aren't very many union members in Congress, and I was thinking, there aren't very many folks who aren't college educated, but that really shapes what kind of policy gets crafted. Do we really have representatives who represent the majority of Americans? There should be lots of union members in Congress if we want to reflect the communities around this country. There should be lots of members of Congress who do not have a college degree, and definitely who do not have advanced degrees. She also went on to lament how difficult it is to run for Congress, how hard it is to break into the establishment two-party system unless you have a lot of money or you are backed by somebody who does. She spoke out once again about campaign finance reform. One of her big talking points, and one of the things she really advocates for, is campaign finance reform. We need to get money out of politics. And obviously that's not going to happen in America right now, where our government is basically just a giant grift for Donald Trump, where Congress is prioritizing the profits of corporations and the interests of lobbyists above the American people and above the Constitution. I think Maxine is right to continue to talk about campaign finance reform and how we need a government that works for the people, not for big business. And the way that we get that is that we get our money out of politics and we have comprehensive campaign finance reform. I completely agree with her. I think she needs to keep bringing that up, even if it's not possible for that to pass right now, because I think that's a very compelling talking point for both sides of the aisle. Part of what is so compelling to conservative working class Republicans is this, Democrats are the elites. Democrats are a corrupt party. People look at Nancy Pelosi and how she won't pass legislation that makes it illegal for members of Congress to buy single company stocks. People on the right look at corporate establishment Democrats and they see corruption. They see the prioritization of special interest and big business very much the same as Republicans are doing. And they're not wrong. And so I think Maxine is absolutely correct. We need to keep pushing campaign finance reform, that it is something that is popular with everybody. Corporate greed and corruption in our federal government, the fact that we have a government that is making it harder for the average working class person to have any quality of life whatsoever, while we now have the greatest wealth disparity in the history of this country, that is a compelling message for everybody across the political spectrum who's working class. The Congresswoman then went on to say, since Trump took office, he has been focused on cutting federal funding that serves families and working people. His focus has been on wrecking the things that we care about and that make our lives better. Whether it is our firefighters fighting forest fires, whether it is NOAA doing weather forecasting, whether it is FEMA relief money, whether it is funding for cancer research, whether it is funding for student loans, whether it's funding for our libraries or infrastructure packages, Trump is gutting and wrecking all of the things that make life even marginally better for working class people. Also, the super rich can get a giant tax break. She then went on to talk about this big, beautiful bill or big, terrible bill or whatever people are calling it now, Trump's reconciliation package. It's not just Trump's, it's all of the Republicans. We need to make them all own it. They are all pushing for things that are awful for all of us. Also, that billionaires can get trillions of dollars in tax cuts, and we're going to raise the debt ceiling, $4.3 trillion. That is something that Republicans of not very long ago would have balked at. All of the Republican voters would have said, we need to be the party of small government. We need to be fiscally responsible. And yet we're watching Republicans right now push to raise our debt ceiling $4.3 trillion while our credit rating is being downgraded. So that means we will, as a nation, have to pay more on that debt than we would have previously. Where are Republicans on the party of fiscal responsibility freaking out over that? I think Rand Paul is like the only one. But Maxine made a couple of good points about this reconciliation bill that I think we should lean into, we should really listen to. She said that Trump and the Republicans are currently ripping away the very thin margin of security that working class people have right now in order to give tax breaks to billionaires. She called the reconciliation bill not a budget, but a tax scam. And then she said something that very much echoes my sentiment, which is we don't have to give in to it. We do not need to act like this bill is already law when it is not. We do not need to act like it is an inevitability that Medicare and Medicaid and SNAP benefits are going to be taken away from the most vulnerable members of our society. We do not have to give Trump power that he doesn't have. We do not have to cede the field. We do not have to give up and pretend that all of this is just going to roll on through and there's nothing we can do to stop it. As I have said repeatedly, we don't have to be doomers. Doomerism is self-defeating. Doomerism only helps Trump. And I just loved the way Maxine said, we do not have to give in to this. We have the option and the obligation to fight back against this. They can't win as long as we're still fighting. So if you are feeling really despairing right now, if you're feeling like everything is big and scary and you want to give up hope and that all is lost and all of those negative thoughts or influencers preaching doomerism, all of that is getting to you right now. Please understand that that is a tactic of this regime. They want to demoralize you. They want you to lose all hope. And I really want to encourage you to take up that line from Maxine and have that be your self-talk right now. We do not have to give in to this. All hope is not lost. There are millions and millions of people resisting. This is hard work. It's difficult. It's scary. But at the end of this, we get to stop Donald Trump and we get to reinstitute our democracy. And also, we get to have accountability for all of these people. And we get to make an America that is more functional than what we had previously. We get to have the campaign finance reform that Maxine talked about. We could fund healthcare for all. We could make sure that every working class person in this country has a higher quality of life. We could make sure that people have healthcare, they have food, they have shelter, they have prosperity. They get to enjoy living in America. They get to enjoy their families and their communities. Like there's I keep saying this over and over again, but like there's no reason we can't all have a high quality of life. And we should be communicating that message. We should absolutely be presenting a better vision for America than the one that Trump is putting forth, a truthful vision, something that is hopeful, but also is something that we absolutely can create. Not only do we need something to hope and plan for, but like we get to do that. We get to create the future that we want. Do not let yourself believe the lie that Donald Trump and the Republicans get to write your future. Do not believe the lie that Donald Trump and the Republicans get to write the future of this country. We don't have to give in to that lie. We need to keep building the movement to restore our democracy, and then we get to decide. We get to craft a future which, as the Congresswoman says, has compassion and human decency at its center. We get to stand together for that future and bring it into being. Okay, I'll be back in a little bit for more on the town. Hello, it's Saturday, May 31st, and I just got home from Congresswoman Maxine Dexter's town hall in Gresham, Oregon, and I want to tell you how it went. I think I've been to pretty much every single town hall that Maxine has had since she took office in January, including the telephone town halls. And in that time, I have watched her consistently, progressively become more outspoken, more courageous, make bigger, bolder statements, and take more actions. If you're not from my part of Oregon, you may not be aware of the fact that Dr. Dexter is one of the 4 representatives from Congress who flew to El Salvador on their own dime to advocate for the freedom for Kilmar Abrego Garcia and the other migrants who are trapped in the torture gulag known as CCOT. I really watched Dr. Dexter find her voice and her courage, and the way that she is advocating for Oregonians and for the American people, for the rule of law, for democracy, and for human dignity is something that makes me really glad that I voted for her and makes me really glad to have her representing us in Congress. I know folks often say, Angela, you should run for Congress. No, I have a Congresswoman who's doing a really good job. My role is to be an active constituent, not only pushing my Congresswoman when I think she needs to do more, but also giving her positive feedback when she is doing the right things. And then obviously also to talk up the good things that she's doing. I actually got to ask a question at the town hall today. Her town halls rely on a ticket system. And I was the second question called. I've never had my ticket pulled ever. And let me just say, if you were there, you watched the recording, the feedback on that microphone was so bad. I could not understand a single thing I was saying into the mic. I got halfway through a word and it would bounce back right in my face. It was very hard to speak. So I was a little bit clumsy. The worst feedback I've ever had talking into a mic. And I'm grateful that the Congresswoman could understand what I was saying. At our town halls here, there usually are so many people in attendance that folks can't just raise their hand. So they use a ticket system. When your ticket gets pulled, you get 90 seconds to stand up and ask your question. So here was mine. I said, the people want to know what more we can do. What can we, the people, do to partner better with our pro-democracy members of Congress so you can be more effective in slowing down and stopping the cruelty and chaos of this regime? What steps do you, Dr. Dexter, think Congress should be taking? And what concrete actions from us, the people, would be the most impactful for you right now? Because we aren't passive in our none of us can afford to be passive right now. None of us can afford to be complacent. We have an obligation, we have a civic duty to make sure that we are defending democracy. And I know that a lot of electeds are not this way, but Congresswoman Dexter is. She very much takes her cues from her constituents. Her desire is to represent her district. And so she really relies on feedback from us. In fact, she said that multiple times at the town hall today, how important it is that we email her, we call her, we let her know what's on our mind, whether it is positive reinforcement for the things that she's doing, whether it's criticism, whether it's ways that we can urge her to do more. She wants to hear it. So your representatives in Congress are supposed to be keeping a tally of calls that come in from constituents on various issues. I know that a lot of Republicans keep their voicemails full. They don't answer the phone. They don't respond to emails. I don't know that they're doing that. If they're not, then they are derelict in their duty as your representative. But Maxine does do that, and her aides are lovely to talk to. But even if you just get the answering machine, leave a quick 15, 30-second comment. It can just be really quick, vote no on this bill. Or it can be, we need a government that is fiscally responsible, and the reconciliation bill is going to increase our debt ceiling $4.3 trillion. That's not responsible. We cannot allow that to happen. That's it. That's all you have to say. She takes tallies of all that, so she can go to her colleagues. She can go to her colleagues in her own party, leadership in her party, but she can also go across the aisle to Republicans and say, look, I got 1,000 calls about this week. People are pissed. The American people do not want this. Or when she takes action, her own leadership can be like, what the hell are you doing? And she can be like, oh, no. I had 1,200 calls from my constituents urging me to do this thing. I have their backing. I am doing my job as their Congresswoman. So it's really, really important that you give your electeds feedback. And it's so important to remember that what we need is solidarity everywhere right now. We all need to be partnering with each other. We need to be holding the line together. And so that's why I asked that question, because I really want us as constituents to understand that we need a partnership with our elected officials, at least the ones who are willing to defend democracy. How can we help them help us? How can we work together to empower each other and be more effective? Because our electeds in Congress, they are our public servants. They work for us. They're not going to be our saviors. But there are things they can do to slow down the horrible things that Trump is doing. And buying us time is really important. And there are ways they can be successful at stopping some of what he's doing. And so we need to know how we can help them be more effective in grinding all of this to a halt and ultimately stopping it altogether. Unfortunately, Dr. Dexter didn't get to fully answer my question because there were hecklers, and I'll talk about that in the next video. But she did manage to make 2 points. The first one was we have to have stronger community. It's really, really important right now that we learn to reform those bonds. We learn how to connect with each other because our strength comes in our solidarity. Having solidarity is so incredibly important right now, not only because when we have, a mass coalition of millions of people, that's where we find our strength and where we build those muscles to push back against what Trump is doing and ultimately stop him. Right, the ultimate goal of mass solidarity to stop what Trump is doing, really, really important. But there's another layer to that as well. Our power really comes on a hyper-local level. The place that we have the most impact is right outside our door, right? I love to say bloom where you're planted. The place, our sphere of influence, where we have the largest ability to make a real difference is right outside our back door, right in our own neighborhoods. And the pandemic and other things have really fractured our community, and it's really fractured our ability to lean on each other. We're very isolated as people here in America. And so we have to learn to forge those connections again, not only so that we can come together to stop this awfulness, but also so that we can better defend each other. When ICE comes for our neighbors, we need to all turn out. There was a story from earlier this week where ICE tried to come into a community and all of the neighbors poured out into the streets, and ICE couldn't really get their job done. They ultimately left without kidnapping those members of the neighborhood. A mass showing of nonviolent resistance, a mass showing of the people, that is enough to stop a lot of what these cowards are doing. And so we've got to build this connection so we can protect vulnerable members of our community. Maybe it's something like defending them against ICE, but maybe it's building mutual aid networks to make sure that children are being fed right now, that our elders are being cared for right now. The second thing that she said is that we need people to be really loud. We need people not to lose faith, not to lose their anger, to hold on to their anger and to use it. She wants folks to share it with her. So like I said earlier, she can use that anger from her constituents to push her harder, to give her more power and more justification for standing up stronger. But also, we need to not get complacent. We need to not be fearful and put our heads in the sand and pretend that all of this is just going to go away or just ignore it. We need to be loud. We need to be vocal so that we are communicating to our neighbors. We are making sure that we are not allowing the things of the Trump regime to be normalized, that we are witnessing what is happening, and that we are speaking truth to power. That's all really, really crucial right now. And I completely agree with her. I've been getting a lot of comments lately where people are like, oh, Angela, I'm afraid for you because you're speaking out and because MAGA are really emboldened. And, I have this young man who's been threatening me. He still calls multiple times a week. I don't pick up the phone, but he still calls me multiple times a week. He stopped sending pizzas to my house, thank God, because it was just a giant waste of time for those delivery drivers who I know are already making minimum wage. But we can't be threatened. We can't be intimidated. We cannot allow our fear to rule us right now. We have got to stand strong. We've got to hold the line and not cede any of our rights. We do not comply in advance. If you fold, if you give up your rights, if you become afraid, if you become timid and you hide in the background and just let this regime roll on through, I want you to understand you will not be protected. There is no amount of appeasement that you can engage in that will make you safe from a fascist regime. We all have to find our courage and stand up because that's the only way we're actually going to be safe. The only way we find safety is standing up together as a unit. So I'm not going to back down. I know Dr. Dexter's not going to back down. I am emboldened and encouraged by the fact that more and more people are standing up and being loud. For example, I'm just going to shamelessly plug June 14th is No King's Day. There are protests all around this country where millions and millions of people will be standing up. It's not that we're unafraid, it's that we know there is no other option, right? Speak even though your voice shakes. You have every right to be scared, but don't give up your rights in the face of that fear. That's what they're counting on. Bullies work on intimidation. They are trying to get you to give up because they know that they are weak and all they have are threats. And they know the more that we stand up, the more we're loud, we're proud, we're pushing back, the more quickly that they are going to topple. So I appreciated those 2 points from Dr. Dexter, and I want to talk about the rest of the town hall in a minute. This question is for the hecklers at Congresswoman Maxine Dexter's town hall in Gresham, Oregon today. If you're not one of those 4 or 5 folks, it's totally okay to scroll on by. But if you were one of those hecklers, I earnestly want to know something. And only you can provide the answer. So at the Congresswoman's town hall today, you were screaming shame on Maxine. You were saying end the genocide in Gaza. You were holding up signs. You were interrupting the Congresswoman repeatedly. You seemed far more interested in shouting her down about what you believed her position was rather than hearing what she actually had to say. She clearly was interested in discussing this issue. My question for you is, how do you think Democrats in Congress are going to stop what is happening in Gaza? What is your plan in detail for the minority members of the House and Senate to stop arming Israel, to stop our tax dollars going to fund the deaths of innocent people? How are the members of Congress, while our country is in the middle of an authoritarian takeover by a fascist regime, while those Democratic members of Congress are unable to get any bills passed, have no control over any committees, have no ability to stop any of the funding, when you heckle them at town halls, and be specific here, what actionable steps do you think they can take? What things do you want them to do? Concrete actions do you want them to engage in that will stop what is happening in Gaza? Explain it to me in detail, because I absolutely understand your outrage. I completely agree with it. And I completely agree with what Congresswoman Dexter said in the town hall today, that what the American government is doing to fund Netanyahu's agenda is unconscionable. But I'm a very solution-minded person, and I understand venting feelings. I understand having really righteous outrage. And to an extent, I understand basically hyperfixating on one cause to the exclusion of all of the other vulnerable people who are suffering right now as well. I understand wanting to focus on one issue and give your energy to that. But the expenditure of that energy has to result in actually helping people. Otherwise, what is it? Otherwise, it's just you having a self-righteous display where you feel very good about what you're doing, but it doesn't actually save any lives. So tell me, when you're screaming at the Congresswoman who wants to stop sending funds to Israel, who absolutely wants to make sure that humanitarian aid goes to the people in Gaza, who has said that Palestinians deserve their own nation, they deserve sovereignty, they deserve dignity, they deserve to be protected, that what we are doing to them as a nation is not only unacceptable and immoral, that it has to stop. What do you want her to do to bring that about when she is in the minority party and cannot get any bills passed in Congress, has no ability to stop what is happening now? She's already signing on to letters. She's already speaking out. She's already refusing to vote for bills that AIPAC is backing. You tell me in clear, simple steps how any Democratic member of Congress can stop the war in Gaza right now. Tell me very clearly, explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, how when Donald Trump is in office and the Republicans control both of the houses in Congress, our human rights are being eroded day by day. People inside the United States of America are being kidnapped off the streets, including students who are speaking out about the horrors in Palestine. They're being kidnapped off the streets and disappeared. When Black women are being kept on life support to be used as incubators. When little children who are American citizens are being kicked out of this country. When families whose houses have been flattened by natural disasters are being denied FEMA funds by Donald Trump. How are we supposed to stop the war in Gaza? Because as much as I want peace for the Palestinian people, I am really fucking fed up with the hecklers who have no plan. They have no strategy. They just want to seem really self-righteous and scream about how what is happening needs to stop, but they don't have any plan. What is your plan? You didn't have a plan when you said don't vote for Kamala, even though the Palestinian people were begging us, do not let Donald Trump get back in office. The only plan that you had was do the thing that hurts Palestinians because it makes you feel really righteous, because a perfect candidate doesn't exist. As long as Donald Trump is in office, what is happening to the people in Palestine will get worse and worse. As long as Donald Trump cozies up to Netanyahu, and as long as Republicans are in control of both houses of Congress, all of that military funding will keep pouring out of this country and to Israel. There were 2 Jewish men who stood up today at the town hall and expressed their profound sadness and frustration over the fact that we can't stop this. And what I heard from our Congresswoman is something that I absolutely agree with. If we care about protecting innocent people in Palestine, the only path to getting any power to be able to do what we want to do to help them is to stop Donald Trump and to get back both the House and the Senate. There is no pushing Donald Trump. There is no pushing the Republicans on this issue. Folks like Maxine can be pushed. Kamala Harris could have been pushed. If you care about Palestinian lives, please tell me, what is your plan to help them that does not first prioritize getting Trump out of office so that we actually have the power to do something? So why aren't more Democratic members of Congress pushing for impeachment right now? Now, I've said for a long time that it is a pipe dream that we are going to get impeachment as long as Republicans are in charge of the House and the Senate. It's not going to happen, y'all. And even if we get back the House, we need the Senate to get conviction and removal. We want to put our energy into things that are going to be efficacious. And right now, I don't think it's particularly strategic to be screaming for impeachment. But I also think it's really important that we normalize the idea that Trump should be impeached, that he has committed myriad impeachable offenses. And not just him, other members of his administration, including J.D. Vance, have also committed impeachable offenses. Definitely Marco Rubio. So we should be talking about that like, hey, this is impeachable. This thing that he did this week, that is yet another impeachable offense. And Republicans in Congress are once again abdicating their constitutional duty. They are betraying their constituents. They are not doing their goddamn jobs by impeaching him. All of that should be talked about extensively. Normalized Democrats should be pointing it out nonstop. Here's another thing he did. Here's another way that Republicans are failing to do their job. Here's another way that Donald Trump is breaking the law. These are things that would have gotten any Democratic president removed from office long ago. So why are Republicans not acting? But I've kind of gone back and forth on Democratic members of Congress who keep putting forward articles of impeachment. And today at my town hall, my Congresswoman answered a question about this. And I thought she had a really good insight here. And I'd like to share it with you because it really kind of shifts my thinking on those members of Congress who are continuing to try to bring up articles of impeachment right now when there's no hope of them going anywhere at all. So the question that a constituent asked was, why aren't more members of Congress going for impeachment? And Maxine said, impeachment should be a no-brainer. He's breaking the laws, and yet we aren't in the majority, meaning Democrats. So it doesn't work. We can't pass any articles of impeachment. We just don't have the numbers. And this is where I thought she had really good insight, and maybe this will be helpful for you as well, understanding why there are there's tension amongst Democrats where some of them want to put forward the articles and others are saying that would be really disastrous for us right now. So it was last week, I think there was a member of the House who tried to put forward articles of impeachment and actually pulled them at the last second. And, you know, it was a little bit of drama there. But Maxine's perspective on that was, when you have articles on the floor and you are going to demand that people vote and get on the record about it, that's well and good for Congresswomen like Maxine, who live in a very solidly blue district where her constituents are like, impeach that fucker now. But when you're looking at Democrats in Congress who live in very purple districts, even like one district south of me, Janelle Bynum here in Oregon, she flipped a red district blue. She lives in a very, very purple district, but she's not the only one. There's a lot of those, and a lot of them are freshmen. She said, you will get them on the record as having voted for impeachment, and it will really piss off their Republican constituents. So why would you force them to go on record when you know in advance it's going to be a losing vote and we are coming up on the midterms, and now they have on their record something that will piss off Republican voters who maybe helped get them into office last time? She said, it's not strategic. It's not strategic. It's a waste of time. And I appreciated, I can't remember who said it. Maybe it was Ezra from Indivisible said that what you want in the headlines right now is all of the horrible things that Trump is doing. We want that front and center, all of the ways he is wrecking this country and he is causing suffering for the American people. What you don't want gobbling up attention in the headlines is that Democrats pushed through another half-hearted vote for impeachment and it failed yet again. Do not give Fox News that headline. And Maxine seemed to say something similar today. If you look at the cost-benefit analysis, this would hurt Democrats in the long run, and it's going to do fuck all to remove Donald Trump from office. It's not politically, in any way expedient. It's not responsible. It's not efficacious in any way. It's not going to get Donald Trump out of office. And all that it does is endanger those Democratic electeds who are in very purple districts. And also give headlines to right-wing media about how Democrats are just a joke, right? What we need is members of Congress acting in a way that draws attention to what Trump is doing, says this is really bad for the American people. We need to put forward legislation to stop it, or we need to put forward legislation that, even if it won't pass, offers an alternative vision for the American people, one that allows Americans to prosper instead of suffer under Donald Trump. That's where the focus needs to be right now. So I appreciated that perspective, and I really agree with Dr. Dexter. And I know for other folks in very solidly blue districts, you may not be thinking about those purple seats and the strategy that must be at play in Washington, D.C. And I think that right now that's a really smart move to not bring those articles of impeachment to the floor when they're just going to do more harm than good. It doesn't mean that your Democratic electeds don't want to impeach Trump, because he has committed multiple impeachable offenses. And we definitely need to be talking about that reality and what needs to happen when Democrats take back the House and the Senate. There must be accountability for everybody in this regime. There must be accountability for all of the laws they have broken. But now is not the time to be actually trying to run an impeachment proceeding and bring those articles to the floor. It's not. We've got to bide our time. We have to think strategically. If I want to get to this step down here, what do I need to do in order to get me to the place where we can have an impeachment and removal? Well, the first step is that we have to make sure that Democrats get back the House and the Senate. Even if they're Democrats that we don't really love, even if it's not going to be the kind of radical remaking of the Democratic Party to be a party for the working class, a labor party, etc. Maybe that's not going to happen right now, but if we want impeachment, we can't do it as long as the Republicans are in control. So think strategically, think step by step by step. How do you get from point A to point D? Or really, it might be like point A to point Q. And thank you, Maxine, for explaining that so clearly to your constituents. At today's town hall in Gresham, Oregon, with Congresswoman Maxine Dexter, one of the constituents asked the question, what can we do about the fact that the federal government is trying to slash funding from public radio and public television? And the Congresswoman had some interesting responses to that question. Now, she said she was a poli-sci major and a student journalist in college, and she very much believes that a free press is the fourth pillar of government, and I agree as well. But part of the problem here is that do we have a free and fair press? Do we have press that is committed to doing good journalism? Or do we have a significant segment of the population that is listening to the media, the press, when what it is a propaganda machine for the alt-right? Okay, that was a lot of my opinion slapped on the end of her statement that the free press should be the fourth branch of government. But I hope you understand there what was me talking and what was Maxine. She did say that a significant portion of our media no longer has journalistic principles, and I completely agree with that. She said we absolutely need to protect public funding for public radio and television, and she also feels like the government should be publicly funding journalism schools where students are learning good journalistic ethics and, understanding what it is to be a journalist and the responsibility that comes with that, how to do that rather than be a propaganda machine. Not that there's ever the ability to completely rid yourself of bias in your reporting, but come on, y'all. We know the difference in what the media outlets now who are capitulating to Trump, well, either like Fox News, who is absolutely promoting Trump's position and helped him gain power, or the corporate media who is afraid of having Trump come after them. And so they're no longer fact checking him. They're no longer in any way wanting to be critical of him. They are capitulating. All of that is incredibly harmful to journalistic integrity, and it's really damaging to our society as a whole. And you understand that Trump wants to cut funding for public radio and public television specifically because he can't buy them, specifically because they want to do real journalism, and that's a threat to an authoritarian. We know that one of the early moves of any kind of, would-be dictator is to try and control the media. And when we look at those pillars of support that uphold autocrats, the media typically becomes one very quickly. And that's why it's so important to support anybody in the media, whether they're independent journalists or they are traditional media outlets that are willing to be non-cooperative with Trump, that are willing to stand up against him, that are willing to still fact check what this regime is saying, that are still willing to do real journalism. Of course, this is me editorializing here and taking a little tangent from what the Congresswoman said, but that's why it's so important that we support independent journalists. If you have extra pennies, subscribe to somebody's Substack that is doing good journalism. Not just journalists, but also like historians who need to be speaking into this moment, like Heather Cox Richardson. Subscribe to folks' TikToks and YouTube channels if they are doing good work. I'm a huge fan of Jessica Craven. She does kind of like a mix of activism and reporting. Make sure that you are supporting independent media that is committed to accurately portraying what is going on, that is committed to doing good journalism. Or if they are a pundit, good editorializing, good analysis. And also let corporate legacy media who capitulates, let them know that you have no interest in giving them your views, your clicks, your pennies until they are willing to stand up. We've got to make sure that we are doing what we can to erode the pillars of support under Donald Trump, and corporate media is definitely one of those pillars that we've got to chip away at. And that really gets back to what the Congresswoman said today. She said, one of the big problems in our society right now is that we don't have a shared understanding of truth. And that's specifically because a large segment of our media is propaganda. She said repeatedly in the town hall today that we have Americans living in completely alternate realities from each other. That's absolutely, absolutely true. It's not red state versus blue state. There's one of my neighbors just down the street who is living in a Trump version, Fox News version of reality. And we are seeing the world through completely different eyes. We are processing it differently. The way that we are understanding what is happening is just completely polar opposite. We have people living side by side all over this country who are basically walking parallel, living in parallel universes, having completely disparate worldviews. And I agree with Maxine that when we have a society that does not have a shared understanding of truth, that it's really, really devastating. It's hard for us to find common ground, but it's hard for us to advocate for the things that will make our society better. I am absolutely for a free and fair press, but I don't think it's possible to overstate how devastating the propaganda machine from the right has been, how devastating Fox News has been when it has come to brainwashing an entire generation of people, more than a generation. It's not just boomers, it's Gen X and millennials who watch Fox News as well. But what Fox News has done in terms of indoctrinating, especially older Americans, has been absolutely devastating for our democracy. And when we look at the conservative, manosphere, alt-right Twitch streamers and podcasters, they have been equally insidious and devastating in their indoctrination of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. If you think they're not reaching your 13, 14, 15-year-old boys, you should look again. They are still propagandizing the youth of this country. And one of the many reasons that Trump is trying to erode our education system is that when people have a robust civics education and when they understand how to think logically, they understand the law, they understand their role as a citizen of this country, and when they understand how both government and the media are supposed to function, it's harder to indoctrinate them. And so Dr. Dexter was talking about how we really need to fund civics education in this country, and we also need a well-funded public media. And I definitely agree with her sentiment about civics education. I have so many people in my comments, right-wingers in my comments, who will come in with not even like the most rudimentary 8th grade civics understanding of how government is supposed to function, much less 12th grade US government. I don't know where that gap in their education happened, but Donald Trump would like to make that wider and wider. If you don't know what the laws are, if you don't know how government is supposed to function, it's much easier for Trump to run roughshod all over the Constitution. So the Congresswoman was saying she is not going to be very persuasive when it comes to reaching people who trust conservative media propaganda machines. She, as a member of the Progressive Caucus, as a Democratic member of Congress, she's not going to be persuasive. It is us that have to reach our friends and family. That the people we know trust us more than they trust some elected in Washington. And so it's up to us to make sure that we are countering people's mis and disinformation. It's up to us to make sure that we are sharing accurate news. It's up to us to make sure that on our social media platforms or in person or over the phone with our relatives, that we are sharing accurate news sources and that we are responding to the propaganda from the right with truth. And I understand that they might not be willing to hear what we have to say because very rarely do facts work when it comes to persuading people. We need compelling narratives. But there are still compelling, truthful narratives coming out of independent media. And I think it's really important that we continue to push back. We continue to try and educate the people that live around us, the people that we love and care for. Right-wing propaganda media has been really successful at splintering the reality that Americans experience, that making it so that it's impossible for us to have a shared understanding of truth. It doesn't mean that all is hopeless, but it also means that we maybe should have been addressing this decades ago. This is not something that is brand new, and it will take time to undo that indoctrination. So many folks only listen to Fox News. And you know, Fox News has made sure that their news package is free in cable packages all across the country. So they made sure that they got into every household in America that pays for cable. At the most basic package, people didn't have to pay for a subscription. That was really good business for them, but it was devastating for our society. And I think the Congresswoman is right. We must continue to fight for a free and fair press. We must fight for the truth, and we must fight to restore, as a society, a shared understanding of what that truth is. Now, PBS, from my understanding, is not taking it lying down, and they are suing the Trump regime. It's also really important right now that we make it a priority to support and defend public broadcasting. Today at Oregon Congresswoman Maxine Dexter's town hall, there were 4 or 5 pro-Palestinian hecklers. And they kept talking over the Congresswoman and interrupting her and other folks. They weren't really interested in hearing what she had to say. They just wanted to scream at her. And I made a video about that a little bit ago, because if we really care about stopping the genocide in Gaza, what is our plan to help the Palestinian people? It can't just be about us venting our anger. It can't just be about our self-righteous indignation. If we want to actually save lives, then we need a strategic plan to be able to do that. And I don't personally see a pathway to help the Palestinian people as long as Trump and the Republicans are in control of the United States government. We had a chance to elect somebody to the White House who we could push on Gaza, who was receptive to listening to the will of the people. We don't have that now. We now have Netanyahu's buddy who wants to continue to use our taxpayer dollars to wipe Gaza off the map and to build a vacation destination for the super rich. So if we want to get from the point where we are today with the Palestinian people experiencing extreme human rights violations, and I don't just mean the military actions that Israel is taking against innocent civilians there, I also mean the fact that people there are starving because they cannot get access to humanitarian aid. If we want to get from there to a place where our tax dollars are no longer funding the horrors that are happening in Palestine, and if we want to get even farther to a place where there's peace for the Palestinian people, but there's also, the ability for them to have their own nation, their own sovereign nation, where they are able to control their own lives and they're no longer living in living and dying in the apartheid state of Israel. What is the plan to get us from here to here and then to here? Because I understand the righteous indignation, I understand the heartache, but also it's not about our feelings. It's not about how bad this makes us feel. It's about saving lives. And that means we need effective planning that is going to get the job done. And screaming at your congresswoman who says we should not be funding arms to Israel, they are carrying out crimes against humanity. But I absolutely think that we should be talking to our electeds about this. We absolutely should continue to be raising this issue. And at Maxine's town halls, they pull tickets, and if your number gets called, you can ask a question. And a gentleman did actually ask about that today, and I want to talk about what he said and what Maxine said in response. So first off, there was a gentleman in the front row who had a large sign. They ask you not to bring signs bigger than 8.5 by 11 so that you don't block the views of the other constituents. Yet he had a large sign he kept holding up. And I recognize this gentleman. He's been at almost every event I've been to for the last several months. He really, really does not like Ron Wyden, and he really, really does not like Maxine Dexter. And he kept repeatedly interrupting her in a way that said he was not interested in engaging in a dialogue with her or hearing what she had to say at all. He just wanted to scream at her. And I understand being really passionate and heartbroken over what is happening in Gaza to the children of Gaza especially. But I don't understand now, and I didn't understand during the 2024 election, that contingent of people who act like the only human rights violation, the only atrocities that are occurring in the world are happening in Gaza. The contingent of never Kamala leftists who seem to prefer Donald Trump getting elected, even though Palestinians said, please do everything that you can, America, to make sure that Trump never gets back in office. And this group of people were perfectly happy for the most vulnerable in America, our immigrants here, our Black women here, our disabled folks, our children, to be sacrificed to the regime of Donald Trump. They didn't care about those other lives. They didn't care about the other genocides going on around the world. They were hyper-focused on Palestine, and I have repeatedly called it their pet atrocity. That's an offensive way to frame it, but it's really accurate. And I don't understand why it is that they feel that the lives of Black women, of children in the US, of disabled folks, of immigrants matter less. Or the lives of people in South Sudan or the Congo, or the millions of children that are now dying because Elon Musk has pulled back USAID, the 60,000 people that have already died because Elon Musk ended tuberculosis and AIDS treatment in Africa. Like, why do those people's lives not matter? That it's only this very performative stance for Palestine and all of this virtue signaling on the internet. And I think we need to be really careful that not everybody who supports an end to the genocide in Gaza is necessarily pro-Palestinian liberation, and that not everybody who is opposed to the genocide in Gaza and is pro-Palestinian liberation is part of that never Kamala leftist, hyper-focused on only Palestine group of people. And today at that town hall, when that man was heckling Maxine from the front row repeatedly, I really appreciated what she said. She said, quote, "My compassion is not limited to one issue, but I appreciate that yours is right now." That is a really good way to frame this group of folks who don't seem to care about any of the other devastation that is happening, that don't seem to understand that the way to actually help the Palestinian people is to stop Trump, that all of these issues are interconnected, right? All of the suffering that people are experiencing in America, all of the suffering of our immigrant population, all of the suffering from cutting off USAID, all of that is connected to what is happening in Palestine, because the longer Trump is in power, the more vulnerable people around the world are going to suffer and die. That the way to help the Palestinian people is to do what we should have done in the first place and listen to them when they begged us to keep Donald Trump out of the White House. Okay, all of that being said, someone did stand up who had a ticket and asked a question about this issue. He said, "I'm a Jewish man and it hurts to read about the assault on Gaza because it's being done with our money." I don't know if anybody else had a literal breakdown having to pay your taxes this year, but I sure did. Maxine said, "We are in an unforgivable position as the US government for facilitating a devastation against an entire people. We, the US government, are accountable for our actions. Gaza is a tragic mess. Our humanitarian aid is not getting through to these people, and that's on us." She said, "We are facilitating Israel's ability to keep doing what they're doing against the Palestinian people." She also said, and she said this before, that she supports the Leahy Law. We already have laws on the books that say we cannot send military aid to countries, including our allies, that are committing human rights violations. She said the United States Congress has repeatedly violated the Leahy Law by choosing to send military funds to Israel. She said she supports a nation state for Gaza and that with Trump in charge, we aren't using any of our diplomatic power to stand up to Netanyahu. Other countries that are traditionally our allies are highly critical of Israel and what they're doing. And yet we are standing with Netanyahu. We are supporting him because Trump is in charge and the Republicans are in charge of Congress. They are the ones voting to send funds to Israel. And there are establishment, Democrats who take money from AIPAC who are also doing that. I'm not excusing them in any way. They also are responsible. But we can't stop anything that is happening in Gaza as long as Trump and the Republicans are in power. Maxine said, "We have enormous instability in our nation, and if our democracy falls, the people in Gaza will be much worse off than they are today." And today they are much worse off than they were, as of October of last year. Maxine said, as a physician, she cares very deeply about what is happening in Palestine. She said she's voted against bills that AIPAC has backed. Maxine said that we need to stand up for the people of Gaza. That's what she's doing. She signed on to Congresswoman Jayapal's resolution about it. She said she has voted against legislation that AIPAC has recommended. She said she is not fearful to stand up for the people of Gaza, and that as a physician, she is deeply concerned about stopping the atrocities that are happening there. So it seems to me here is an elected official that we can partner with, but I don't see the path forward to stopping this until we first deal with the big roadblock of Trump taking over the American government in an illegal coup, instituting an authoritarian regime. Like, if we need the democratic process to stop funding what's happening in Gaza, then we have to restore democracy first. When I voted for Kamala Harris, That was a decision to vote for human rights, human dignity, and that included seeing that as the best possible option on the table to stop the genocide in Gaza. So now we have Trump in office, and I would just encourage folks, even if you are one of those never Kamala leftists, and the only issue that you care about, the only issue that you are hyper-focused on is what is happening in Gaza. And for those of us for whom our compassion is not limited to one issue, I would say that we have something in common. We have a shared goal right now, because what both of us want requires us first toppling the Trump regime. If you actually want to help save the Palestinian people, screaming at an elected who wants to do the same thing and is fighting the Trump regime is not how you do that. Partnering with her for the restoration of our democracy is. We don't have the luxury of being puritanical in our politics if we want to save vulnerable people. We have to partner with a broad diversity of folks to literally save lives right now. Okay, I want to talk about the last two questions that were asked at Congresswoman Maxine Dexter's town hall in Gresham, Oregon today, May 31st. A young man stood up and said, "I'm stressed out." And Maxine said, "I'm stressed out too." He said he was losing funding at his job to help people reduce fire risk. These are the consequences of the Trump regime, cutting off funding for all of the things that kept us safer and gave us a better quality of life and more security. Trump is slashing all of that. He said, "I'm somebody who believes in government and taxation, and yet still there are these moments where I want my money back." That got loud cheers. I broke down having to pay my taxes this year because I know the horrible things that the Trump regime is going to do with that money. It is terrible to be stuck in a really broken, exploitive system and not be able to stop what is happening. He said, as a Jewish man, it's really hard to see more money being spent to blow the limbs off little kids than to care for our country or to make our lives better. I would also add to that, watching innocent people be abducted and sent to torture prisons. Watching little children who are American citizens be expelled from this country. Watching Black women be used as human incubators. That's the kind of shit that's happening in America right now. I said this yesterday, but the New York Times has reported that more than 300,000 people have already died because of what Elon Musk has done to USAID. At this rate, by the end of the year, it will be over 1 million people who will have died from entirely preventable causes. They will have died from starvation, a lack of access to their TB or HIV meds, a lack of basic medical care, a lack of clean water. Also, Elon Musk could save the government $0. And So this gentleman asked, what could Maxine say to people to persuade them that the Democratic Party is where it's at? Why should they not go try to find solutions elsewhere? Maxine responded by saying, our government has failed us. She said it's failed our young people. Her kids are 18 and 21. And she said they don't think the government works at all. I hear that from a lot of Gen Z, from my kids' friends especially. She said we now have the worst income inequality we've ever had in this country. The 10 richest men in the United States, who were already worth tens if not hundreds of billions of dollars, they have earned $365 billion since Trump has taken office. Meanwhile, we are all struggling. Just a very few extremely wealthy men hoard the vast majority of the resources of this country. She said Trump and the Republicans are going to make it far worse because they're going to add $4.3 trillion to the debt if this reconciliation bill passes, and that Trump's chaotic behavior has resulted in a downgraded credit rating for our country. That means we are going to pay higher interest on our debt. She said she's working class, from a working class background. She was the first person in her family to go to college, and she believes in fiscal accountability and fiduciary responsibility. She said a lot of people in Congress are for government efficiency, not Elon Musk's version, but like actual accountability, actually making sure that we spend our resources wisely. Sometimes in a massive society of 340 plus million people, we have to pay for things that maybe we don't personally value. But that's far different than our money being spent on things that are actively harming us and vulnerable people. And that's entirely different than our tax money going straight into the pockets of a few extremely rich men. She said this country needs to stop deficit spending and start investing in working families. She couldn't address the why should we vote Democratic and not go for a third party, because she's not there to talk about political parties specifically, because she represents all Oregonians regardless of who they voted for. But she said we're stuck in a two-party system that is emboldened by a lack of oversight and lots of dark money. She said, we need campaign finance reform. Now, that is one of her most consistent talking points at every event I have attended of hers, is that we need campaign finance reform. She also made a nod to ranked choice voting, and I said, we have that in Portland. I love it. She said ranked choice voting or star voting or whatever you want to call it would allow for third-party candidates to be more viable, to have more of a chance to move up and be influential. I completely agree. There is a reason Republicans and Democrats don't want ranked choice voting. I really appreciated, she said, we should change the two-party system, but that is what we have right now. And that's something that I consistently talk about in my work, is that we can have this fantasy about what we want, but then there is the reality of what we have in front of us and what we actually have to deal with. Are we operating in the real world, or are we operating in our own ideals? And I am somebody who is extremely idealistic, but then when I go to act, I tend to be very pragmatic. Because there's the kind of world that I want to build, and then there is the world that I have to deal with. There are the options that I wish were available to me, but then if I want to actually be effective, I have to work with the options that are in front of me and are truly accessible. The perfect political system does not exist. The one we have right now is extremely corrupt. The perfect candidate who aligns with all of my values will never exist, and so I've got to work with the candidates who are on the ballot. I very much appreciated Maxine's position that we need to invest in the working class and in families. That is a compelling message that can reach everybody. And it's something that's truthful too. This is an America that should be of, by, and for the people, not for mega corporations, and not for the few billionaires up here, but for all of the rest of us. And that leads me into the last question from Maxine's town hall. A woman stood up and said, it's really rewarding to be with other people who care when we are feeling lost and frustrated. I've said that before. Go join your local grassroots movement. Go connect with community. Go find people who can help feed you and help give you a measure of hope, right? Hope is catching. Hope is contagious. And when you are around other people who care about the things you care about, it helps keep you going. She asked about something that I repeatedly talk about because I cannot wrap my brain around it, which is Republicans in Congress. She said, your colleagues, meaning Republicans, have lost any sense of humanity. People are being disappeared off the streets. What is going on in your colleagues that allows them to be so hateful and allows them to vote for such cruel policies? She said, we are experiencing such pain. Why are Republicans voting for this? Where is their humanity? Congresswoman Dexter said, this is not the country that I wanted for my children or for my patients. This is not who we should aspire to be. We have to bring compassion back. We need a country where speaking out against your government is not going to get you disappeared. And that is what is happening right now. We are watching students who are here on visas be snatched off the streets for exercising their First Amendment rights, simply for criticizing the government. She said, I can't really explain why my Republican colleagues continue to be cowards. She gave an example of a freshman Republican congressman from Colorado who understands that the pendulum is going to swing back the other way and Democrats are likely to regain the majority soon. But he's also looking to the midterm elections and knows that he's going to be up for re-election. And he's been told if he strays from Trump's agenda, he'll get primaried by a hard right MAGA Republican and he'll get voted out. But if he's a moderate Democrat, is that really what's going to happen? His constituents elected him in the first place. Why would he think they want a hard right MAGA candidate? And also, fuck you. If you are so worried about your seat in Congress that you are willing to vote for the deaths of innocent people, you are willing to vote for the destruction of democracy, for Trump to absolutely obliterate the Constitution, destroy this country, and inflict suffering on hundreds of millions of people because you are worried that you will lose your seat in the midterms, fuck you. Okay, sorry I got worked up. I said that right after I quoted Maxine saying, we need to bring compassion back. I don't have compassion for Republicans in Congress. I have no compassion for Republicans in Congress. They are fascists. She did say we need 4 Republicans in the House to find their courage. We just need 4 of them to start voting against Trump, to join with the Democrats. She then said, we have a country with people living in completely alternative realities from each other. And I mentioned this before. She said she really thinks it's going to require us hitting rock bottom before people wake up. She said, take Nebraska, for example, right? People voted in elected officials who think like they do. They are MAGA. They voted for MAGA. But now we're watching Nebraska's dairy industry absolutely go belly up because they can't get any migrant workers. They voted to have all of their dairy industry workers kidnapped off the streets and sent to detention centers. She said she thinks it's going to have to hit rock bottom for those parts of the country before we can build back something better. She also said, we cannot give up on this nation. We have to offer Americans a vision of a better future, compassion, economic security, food, shelter, healthcare, and human rights for all. Maxine said she doesn't believe that people are good or bad. She said that people are in pain and that Americans have lost their security. For the working class, there is no security and there is a lot of fear. She said some people's fear brings them to a place of compassion, and other people's fear brings them to a place of reflexive aggression. And the people who were susceptible to Trump and MAGA, their fear reaction is the latter. And she said, we have to speak to those people's fear, address their needs. And she reiterated, we cannot give up on this nation. And while I don't agree with everything Maxine says, I think she's right there. We cannot give up on us. My Congresswoman said something at her town hall today in Gresham, Oregon, that I keep thinking about. She said, when you look at working class America and you see the folks who voted for Trump and the folks who didn't, that it's not bad versus good. It's not evil versus good. That she doesn't think people are good or bad. That she thinks all of working class America is scared. And part of that has to do with the fact that we live in kind of two alternate realities. We're getting our information from two entirely different sources, and that has shaped our worldview. It has shaped our knowledge base. It has shaped our outlook in drastically different ways. And so there are people living side by side in the same neighborhood who basically see a completely different America, have a completely different view of other people, of reality itself. But she said she thinks that working class people in America, we're all in pain and we're all afraid. That Americans have lost their security. Working class Americans no longer have the level of security that previous generations had. And I completely agree with her, and I've been saying that for a long time. There are very valid criticisms that Trumpers have. They have been denied access to the American dream just like you or I have been. Their quality of life is also reduced. They also feel that life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, prosperity, and security is denied them. They know that they are being squeezed. They know they can't afford the things that their parents and grandparents could afford. They know that they have to work longer hours for less pay. They know even throughout the course of their lifetimes that they are working harder for less. They are less secure. They are more stressed. They are more exhausted. That is a universal reality for the American working class. Because at the same time that we are all feeling like this, we are all being squeezed harder and harder and harder. Who is doing the squeezing? Who is profiting off of our suffering and our exploitation? It's the billionaires. It's the super rich folks at the top who are consolidating the wealth of this nation. We now see greater economic disparity than we have ever had at any point in our history. The wealth gap is the greatest it has ever been. Just a handful of extremely wealthy men at the top are hoarding literally trillions of dollars. The difference is that people on the right have bought the lies of Donald Trump, that it is immigrants who are to blame, that it is children in poverty who are to blame, that it is disabled folks who are to blame for your average working class person struggling so hard. I don't understand why they believe that, but they do. They have been pitched very effectively a set of scapegoats so that they vilify the most vulnerable and they see folks who are in their class as the enemy, rather than uniting in solidarity against the true adversary, the group of people who are truly exploiting them, the oligarchs at the top. We over here on the left, we understand, we have some measure of class consciousness, and we know the reason that we are getting absolutely fucked. We know who's to blame. We know who is hurting us so badly. But we are all suffering, we are all in pain, we are all afraid, not only for ourselves, but for our children. We feel that the American dream is slipping through our fingers. We feel that this nation is going in the wrong direction. We feel that our prosperity is declining, that there are fewer good days ahead of us. It's just that the folks on the right believed Donald Trump when he said he would make America great again, that he would bring back that prosperity, that he would take them back to an era that never really existed and give them the kind of happiness and security that they're seeking, because they are being deprived of those things right now. Now, Trump really effectively weaponized their racism, their misogyny, their hatred of people in poverty, which very much stems out of their own fear that they are like this close from falling into poverty themselves. So they're desperate to differentiate themselves from folks who are struggling harder than they are. because they don't want to look at that. They don't want to be associated with that. They don't want anybody to see that they are on the cusp of tipping into that group themselves. But again, we are all afraid. We are all scared. We're all struggling. And my Congresswoman said, I don't see any of these people on either end as good or bad, that we are all people in pain, that the American working class has lost our security. We have lost our hope in many ways. And she said, when people are in pain, the future feels really uncertain, that the fear really rises up, right? And she said some folks' response to fear is to bring themselves to a place of compassion. And some folks' response to fear is to fall into reflexive aggression. And that those of us on the left, our response when we see working class people struggling harder and harder, we see more people tipping into poverty, is to say, you know what, let's approach this with compassion, seeing everybody, all people with humanity and dignity, and trying to strive for an America where everybody gets their needs met, where prosperity, a good quality of life is accessible to everybody here. And we understand who is depriving us of that. Okay, well, we know what to do. Tax the rich. We know what we need. Campaign finance reform. We know what we need. Dark money out of politics so that corporate interest does not supersede the interest of the people. What we need is an America of, by, and for the people. We need legislation that provides the quality of life that we all deserve. MAGA, on the other hand, leaned into the reflexive aggression, and Trump again harnessed that. He weaponized it. He weaponized their fear to target the most vulnerable, to allow him to enact an authoritarian takeover of this country. So I guess my question for y'all is, what is the way to reach those people? I don't think it's our obligation to have to reach diehard MAGA. I don't think it's our obligation to try to play Beauty and the Beast and try to rescue people who are down the cult of MAGA. I know from listening to experts on cults that often those people have to leave themselves, either when the leader of their cult dies or something extremely catastrophic happens, and then we can't really talk sense into them. We definitely can't bring facts to the conversation and hope that will be persuasive. So I don't think that we are trying to reach diehard MAGA. I don't think that that's our responsibility. Actually, if we could just get the people who didn't vote in the last election to vote, we don't need to convert any diehard MAGA. But there is this large group of people who voted for Donald Trump because they wanted something different. They were suffering under Biden. They knew that when Biden said, we have the greatest the economy's booming, they weren't feeling that. They weren't living that. And they were fearful for their future. And so they voted for the other guy. And maybe their racism played into it somewhat. Maybe their, hatred of immigrants. They believed some of the lies of we just get rid of all the illegals, life will be better. Well, now they realize women and children are being abducted off the streets. And that's not what they voted for. All of our farm workers are being abducted and sent to detention centers. There's nobody to work our dairy farms. There's nobody to harvest strawberries. There's nobody to plant. There's nobody to, keep our agriculture industry going. And they're like, well, shit, that's not what I voted for. There is that section of folks who have let their reflexive aggression, who have let their fear tip into othering vulnerable groups. They've let their fear drive them to vote for Trump. And at what point are they reachable? What is the compelling message? What is the vision for the American people that reaches them? Because Trump's vision of Make America Great Again, pretty generic. They could plug their own ideas of what greatness looks like into that slogan. That appealed to them. And they maybe didn't dig very deep under the surface, right? They told us all Project 2025, that's not going to happen. They didn't bother to read up on anything. They just said, I'm really fucking miserable right now. And Joe Biden has not made life any better for me. So I'm going to vote for the other guy. So now that he's actively making their lives worse, and it's going to get a lot worse over the next few months. Is there a way to reach them? Is there a way for them to be activated for compassion? Is there a way to convert their fear from aggression into compassion? Is there a way to help them realize what they voted for was hurting themselves, hurting everybody that they love, hurting this nation, eroding our democracy? Is there a way to reach those folks? And what does that look like? I don't know. I want to sit with that for a while, because I think that initially I kind of bristled when Dr. Dexter said there's not good and bad people. My ability to believe in the goodness of people is severely eroded since November. But I think she has a point here when she says that it is fear that is driving people one of two ways, toward compassion or toward aggression, and that all of us in the working class are rightly afraid. So what do we do with that knowledge, with that, realization of that's what's going on? How do we take that information and craft a plan to help us going forward? So I don't know what you think. I'm going to sit with that for a little bit, but keep coming back to it.